Under the harsh, fluorescent glare of Fort Banner's main checkpoint, two young military police officers slam a weathered backpack onto the cold metal table. The sound echoes through the sterile corridor like a gunshot. The woman standing before them doesn't flinch. Her civilian clothes are unremarkable. Dark jeans, a simple gray jacket, but there's something unsettling about her stillness. A dark stain spreads across her left shoulder, still damp, still fresh. "Ma'am, step back from the table," the first MP commands, his voice tight with authority. She doesn't move. Her eyes remain locked on the security camera mounted above them, as if she's daring it to blink first. The second guard's hand drifts toward his sidearm as he begins unzipping the bag. His fingers freeze when they encounter something unexpected. Fabric, soft and worn. "What the hell?" "Stand down." The voice cuts through the tension like a blade. Colonel Nathan Reed's footsteps echo as he approaches the checkpoint. Nobody touches anything else. The woman's lips curve into something that might be a smile. Still, she doesn't look away from the camera. On the table, partially unfolded, lies a single piece of storm gray cloth. Embroidered into its center is a faded falcon, its wings spread wide, its eyes fierce despite the years that have dulled its threads. The silence stretches. The colonel's face has gone pale. What happens when your greatest enemy is someone you once saved? Ever wondered what happens when someone erases your name from the records, but not your legacy? Hit subscribe. This story starts where the official files stop. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling expanse of Fort Banner, Arizona, where the desert heat already shimmered off the tarmac despite the early hour. This wasn't just another military installation. It was home to some of the most advanced drone testing facilities in the country, where million-dollar aircraft danced through simulated combat scenarios daily. Mara Ellison moved through this world like a ghost. At 45, she possessed the rare ability to blend into any crowd, her unremarkable appearance masking a mind that could dissect complex electronic systems the way others read morning newspapers. Her contractor badge hung from a simple lanyard, the word consultant printed in sterile black letters that told nothing of her true capabilities. She stood now at the base of Communications Tower 7, a 60-foot steel monument that had been the bane of the technical division for 3 days running. The tower's failure had created a dead zone in the facility's network, grinding drone operations to a halt and costing the military thousands of dollars in delayed testing. "Ma'am, we've had our best people on this for 3 days," Staff Sergeant Martinez explained, wiping sweat from his brow. "The signal keeps dropping every 47 minutes. Mara worked in silence, her movements precise and economical. Within minutes, she had identified what the sophisticated diagnostic equipment had missed: a hairline fracture in a grounding wire. 11 minutes later, the tower hummed back to life. "How did you—" Martinez began, but Mara was already walking away, her black notebook clutched against her chest. The notebook was unremarkable from the outside, its cover worn smooth by years of handling. But inside, written in Mara's careful script, were pages of diagrams and code sequences that would have made the base's security officers very nervous. On the first page, in block letters, she had written, "Failsafe Protocol." The diagrams bore an unsettling resemblance to classified encryption patterns used by a unit that, according to official records, had never existed. As Mara walked back toward the main facility, her phone buzzed with an alert from the base's monitoring system. She glanced at the screen and froze. The signal pattern displayed there was one she had hoped never to see again. A specific frequency disturbance that matched a vulnerability she had designed over a decade ago. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. Someone else was speaking her language, using her own creation against the very people she had once sworn to protect. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it the distant sound of drone engines warming up for another test flight. But Mara barely heard them. Her mind was already racing through possibilities, each one more troubling than the last. She had come to Fort Banner as a simple contractor, invisible and unremarkable. But the past, it seemed, had other plans. The communications center buzzed with the familiar hum of dozens of monitors displaying real-time data streams from across the facility. Mara settled into an empty workstation, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced ease. To anyone watching, she appeared to be running routine diagnostics on the tower repair. In reality, she was conducting a much deeper investigation. Line by line, she traced the signal anomaly back through the system's logs. The pattern was subtle, so subtle that the automated security protocols had dismissed it as routine interference. But Mara recognized the signature. It was her own work, a backdoor she had built into the original system architecture years ago, when she still wore a uniform that officially didn't exist. The Falcon unit had been created for situations that required solutions the regular military couldn't provide. They were ghosts by design, their operations scrubbed from records before the ink was dry. Mara had been their systems architect, the one who built the digital infrastructure that kept them invisible while they worked in the shadows. She pulled up another screen, cross-referencing the anomaly with historical data. The pattern had appeared 3 times in the past week, each occurrence lasting exactly 97 seconds. Someone was testing the system, probing for weaknesses with surgical precision. Interesting reading? Mara's hands stilled on the keyboard. She turned to find Lieutenant Kendra Cho standing behind her, the young cybersecurity officer's expression carefully neutral. At 28, Cho was everything Mara had never been. Sharp-pressed uniform, regulation haircut, eyes that missed nothing. "Just running post-repair verification," Mara replied, her voice steady. "Making sure the tower fix holds." Cho moved closer, her gaze scanning the monitors. "That's a lot of historical data for a simple verification. Thoroughness prevents callbacks." Cho's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "I've been reviewing your work history, Ms. Ellison. Very impressive. Though there's an interesting gap in your resume. About 12 years, right in the middle of your career." Mara's fingers found the notebook in her lap, tracing its edges. "I took time off. Personal reasons." 12 years is a long break. Must have been very personal. Before Mara could respond, an alarm chimed softly through the communications center. Both women turned toward the main display, where a new alert was flashing. Another signal anomaly, this one stronger than the previous incidents. Mara's blood ran cold as she read the frequency pattern. It wasn't just testing anymore. Someone was actively accessing the system, using her own back door to burrow deeper into the facility's network. "That's not possible," Cho muttered, her fingers flying across her own keyboard. "Our firewalls should have caught that." But Mara knew better. She had designed those firewalls to be impenetrable from the outside. The only way through was from the inside, or with knowledge that officially didn't exist. She closed her eyes, memories flooding back unbidden. The last mission, the extraction that went wrong, the teammate she had risked everything to save, only to watch him disappear into the chaos of a burning compound. Jackson Muir, the ghost who had haunted her dreams for over a decade. "Miss Ellison?" Cho's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" Mara opened her eyes, her decision crystallizing. I need to speak with Colonel Reed. Now. The walk to Colonel Reed's office felt like a march toward judgment. Mara's contractor badge swayed against her chest with each step, a constant reminder of her outsider status. But the weight of the notebook in her hand felt heavier, filled with secrets that could either save lives or destroy them. She found Reed in his office, hunched over a stack of incident reports. At 52, Nathan Reed carried himself with the bearing of a man who had seen too much, but still believed in doing what was right. When he looked up and saw Mara in his doorway, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. Ms. Ellison, I heard about the tower repair. Impressive work. We need to talk, Colonel, about something that officially never happened. Reed's pen stopped moving. He studied her face for a long moment, then stood and closed the door behind her. I'm listening. Mara set the notebook on his desk and opened it to a specific page. The diagram showed a complex network architecture with nodes and pathways that formed an almost organic pattern. At the center, drawn in red ink, was the outline of a falcon. Someone is using this, she said simply. Someone who knows what it is. Reed leaned forward, his expression growing grave. The falcon encryption. I thought all traces of that were destroyed after Al-Qamar, after the unit was disbanded, after we were all supposed to disappear. Mara's voice carried years of carefully controlled emotion. But you can't destroy knowledge, Colonel. You can only hope the people who carry it use it wisely. The Al-Qamar operation had been their last. A precision strike deep in hostile territory, designed to eliminate a high-value target who had been feeding intelligence to enemy forces. The mission had gone sideways when their extraction point was compromised. In the chaos that followed, Mara had made a choice that haunted her still. How many of you survived Al-Qamar? Reed asked quietly. I thought I was the last, but someone else remembers our code. Reed walked to his window, gazing out at the testing facilities where million-dollar drones prepared for their daily flights. What do you need? 72 hours of access to the drone systems. Full access, not the limited contractor permissions I have now. That's not something I can authorize lightly. The security protocols alone. This isn't sabotage, Colonel. Mara's voice carried a weight that made Reed turn back to face her. This is betrayal by someone who speaks our language, someone who knows exactly how to turn our own protections against us. As if summoned by their conversation, Lieutenant Cho appeared in the doorway. Colonel, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. The signal anomaly from earlier, it's back, and it's stronger. Reed and Mara exchanged glances. How much stronger? Reed asked. It's not just probing anymore, sir. Someone is actively downloading system schematics. Our firewalls are responding, but it's like they know exactly which paths to take. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. She pulled out her phone and showed Cho the frequency pattern she had captured earlier. Does it match this? Cho's eyes widened. Exactly. How did you? Because I wrote the original code. Mara turned back to Reed. Colonel, I need that access. Now. Reed was quiet for a long moment, weighing the implications. Finally, he nodded. 72 hours. But Lieutenant Cho shadows you every step of the way. Cho's jaw tightened. Sir, with respect, we don't know anything about this woman's background. Her clearance is civilian level, and there are gaps in her history that... The gaps are classified above your pay grade, Lieutenant, Reed said firmly. But your concerns are noted. You'll monitor everything she does. As they prepared to leave, Mara paused at the door. Colonel, There's something else you should know. Whoever is doing this, they're not just trying to steal information, they're trying to send a message. What kind of message? Mara's hand tightened on the notebook. The kind that says they remember what we did, and they haven't forgiven us for it. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as they made their way to the secure computing facility. Behind them, Lieutenant Cho followed at a careful distance, her hand resting on the encrypted tablet where she had discreetly installed a tracking program on Mara's equipment. Trust in the military was something earned through shared danger and proven loyalty, and Kendra Cho wasn't ready to trust anyone who carried secrets that deep. The secure computing facility hummed with the quiet intensity of a digital battlefield. Banks of servers lined the walls like silent sentinels, their blinking lights creating a constellation of activity in the dimly lit room. Mara moved through this electronic maze with the confidence of someone returning home after a long absence. "I'll need a direct interface with the primary drone control systems," she said, settling into a workstation that commanded a view of the entire facility. Multiple monitors flickered to life at her touch, displaying streams of data that would have overwhelmed most technicians. Lieutenant Cho positioned herself at an adjacent station, her fingers already dancing across her own keyboard. "I'm logging everything you access," she announced. "Standard security protocol. I wouldn't expect anything less." For the next 2 hours, Mara worked in focused silence. Line by line, she traced the intrusion patterns through the system's architecture. The attacker was good, better than good. They moved through the network like water finding cracks in stone, exploiting vulnerabilities that shouldn't have existed. But Mara knew they existed because she had put them there. "Your gear isn't listed in any of our equipment inventories," Cho observed, watching as Mara connected a small black device to the main console. "Where did you get it?" Instead of answering, Mara pulled up a new screen and began typing. The code that appeared was unlike anything in the military's standard programming languages. It was elegant, almost organic, with functions that seemed to anticipate problems before they occurred. "This is beautiful work," Cho admitted reluctantly. "I've never seen architecture like this." "You weren't supposed to." Mara's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Watch this." She executed a command sequence that caused the entire display to shift. The random-looking data suddenly formed a pattern, letters and numbers that spelled out a message. "Your ghost left me behind." Cho leaned forward, her skepticism replaced by fascination. "Someone left you a message in the system breach?" "Not someone. Someone specific." Mara's voice carried a weight of old pain. "Someone who knows exactly how to hurt me." Cho stared at the message, her training kicking in. "This is personal. Who is he?" "Someone I should have let die." Mara's fingers trembled slightly over the keyboard. "Someone whose life I saved, and whose soul I destroyed in the process." "That's not possible. Saving someone can't what? Can't break them? Can't make them wish they died with dignity instead of living as a coward?" Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Lieutenant, there are some rescues that feel like curses." The room's atmosphere shifted as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Colonel Reed appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. "We have a problem. Central Command is asking questions about the security breaches. They want a full report by morning." "They won't get one," Mara said firmly. "Not until this is finished. That's not your call to make." Mara turned to face him fully. "Colonel, 12 years ago, I disobeyed a direct order. My team was supposed to extract from Al-Qamar when the mission went sideways, Clean exit, minimal casualties, acceptable losses. Her fingers found the notebook again, a gesture that had become almost unconscious. But there was a man trapped in the burning compound. Jackson Muir. Communications specialist, barely 32, with a wife and young daughter back home. The order was to leave him. Reed's expression softened slightly. But you didn't. Chuck, I went back. Pulled him out of that hell while the building collapsed around us. Lost 3 other team members doing it. Mara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I thought I was saving a hero. Turns out I was saving a coward. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the servers. Cho found herself leaning forward, caught up in a story that was reshaping her understanding of the woman beside her. After the extraction, Jackson disappeared. No debriefing, no contact, nothing. We assumed he was dealing with trauma, maybe getting help. The unit was disbanded 6 months later, and we all went our separate ways. But he's back now, Reed said. He's back, and he's angry. The message in the system, your ghost left me behind. That's his way of telling me he remembers. He remembers that I saved him, and he remembers that it cost other people their lives. Mara turned back to her keyboard and began typing again. This time, the code that appeared was different, more aggressive, with functions that seemed designed to hunt rather than hide. What are you doing? Cho asked. Setting a trap. If Jackson wants to play games with my own code, I'll give him something to play with. Her fingers flew across the keys with deadly precision. I'm going to create a honeypot, a false vulnerability that looks irresistible. When he takes the bait, we'll have his location. And then? Mara's smile was sharp as a blade. Then we finish what Al-Kamar started. The digital trap was elegant in its simplicity. Mara had embedded it deep within the drone control protocols, disguised as a routine maintenance subroutine that would be invisible to casual observation. To anyone with intimate knowledge of the Falcon encryption, however, it would appear as a golden opportunity, a backdoor into the most sensitive systems on the base. How long before he takes the bait? Colonel Reed asked, settling into a chair beside Mara's workstation. Not long. Jackson was always impatient. It's what made him a good communications specialist, but a poor soldier. Mara's eyes never left the screen, where lines of code scrolled past like digital prophecy. He'll see the opening and assume I made a mistake. Lieutenant Cho had been unusually quiet for the past hour, her earlier skepticism replaced by something approaching awe. The level of sophistication in this system? You built all of this? I built the foundation. The Falcon unit was designed to operate in environments where traditional military infrastructure couldn't reach. We needed systems that could adapt, evolve, survive. Mara's voice carried a note of pride that she couldn't quite suppress. What you're seeing is 12 years of evolution. The main display suddenly flashed red. An alert tone chimed softly through the facility's speakers. He's here, Mara whispered. On the screen, they could see the intrusion in real time, a digital presence moving through the system with predatory grace. Jackson was using the same techniques Mara had taught him years ago, but with refinements that spoke of years spent perfecting his craft. My God, Cho breathed. He's not just accessing the system. He's rewriting it. They watched in fascination and horror as Jackson's code began to spread through the network like a virus. But this wasn't random destruction. It was surgical, precise, targeting specific vulnerabilities that would cripple the facility's defenses without triggering immediate alarms. He's good, Reed admitted grudgingly. He learned from the best, Mara replied, her fingers already moving to counter the attack. But he forgot one thing about me. What's that? I never teach anyone everything. Mara's counterattack was swift and devastating. Hidden subroutines that Jackson had never known existed suddenly activated, wrapping around his intrusion like digital quicksand. Within seconds, his access was not just blocked, it was redirected, channeled through a pathway that led directly back to his physical location. Got him, Mara said with grim satisfaction. Warehouse district, about 15 miles east of here. He's using a mobile setup, probably in a van or truck. Colonel Reed was already reaching for his radio when the speakers crackled to life. Jackson's voice filled the room, older than Mara remembered, hardened by years of bitterness, but unmistakably familiar. Hello, Mara? Did you miss me? Mara leaned toward the microphone. Hello, Jackson. I wondered when you'd finally work up the courage to face me. Courage? His laugh was bitter. You want to talk about courage? You left me to rot in that compound while you played hero. Do you know what they did to me after you pulled me out? Do you know what it cost me? I saved your life. You saved a broken man. My wife left me 6 months after I came home. Said I wasn't the same person. My daughter, she's 30 now, Mara. 30, married with a daughter of her own, and she won't even speak to me anymore. Won't let me see my granddaughter. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the way I flinch every time a door slams. You think pulling me out of that fire was a mercy? You gave me a lifetime of knowing I was too weak to die with my brothers. Mara's hand tightened on the microphone. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing would have been to let me die with some dignity. Instead, you gave me a lifetime of knowing I was a coward who needed to be rescued. The pain in his voice was raw, real, and it cut through Mara's defenses like a blade. She had carried the weight of that decision for 12 years, but she had never considered that her choice might have been a curse rather than a blessing. So what now? She asked quietly. You destroy this place? Kill innocent people? How does that balance the scales? I'm not here to destroy anything, Mara. I'm here to give them what we deserved all along, recognition. The Falcon unit saved lives, prevented wars, kept the peace in ways the world will never know. And what did we get? Erasure, denial, official non-existence. The screens around them suddenly filled with classified documents, mission reports, casualty lists, commendations that had never been awarded. Jackson was uploading everything to the base's public servers, preparing to broadcast the Falcon unit's hidden history to the world. The world deserves to know what we did, he continued. What we sacrificed. What you made me sacrifice. Jackson, stop. This isn't the way. There is no other way. You made sure of that when you erased us from history. Mara's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to stop the upload, but Jackson's code was too well entrenched. In minutes, every classified operation the Falcon unit had ever conducted would be public knowledge. I can't let you do this, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. You can't stop me. I'm using your own system against you. Poetic justice, don't you think? But Mara was already 3 steps ahead. Her fingers found a sequence she had hoped never to use. A master override that would shut down the entire network, destroying Jackson's upload, but also crippling the base's operations for days. Texas Toxics to 39111, Texi text to 11, chunk 1116. From 391 TXT. Actually, she said, her voice carrying the cold certainty of someone who had made an impossible choice. I can. She pressed enter. The silence that followed was deafening. Every screen in the facility went dark simultaneously, the steady hum of servers fading to nothing as Mara's override command cascaded through the network. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow that made the room feel like the inside of a beating heart. "Jesus Christ," Lieutenant Cho whispered, staring at her blank monitors. "You just killed everything." "Not everything," Mara replied, her voice hollow. "Just the parts that mattered to him." Colonel Reed's radio crackled to life with urgent reports from across the base. Drone operations had ceased mid-flight, forcing emergency landings. Communication systems were down. Even basic administrative functions had been crippled by the shutdown. "How long before we can bring it back online?" Reed asked. 6 hours, maybe 8. The system will need to rebuild itself from the ground up. Mara stood slowly, her legs unsteady after hours of tension. "But it will be clean. Whatever Jackson planted in there, it's gone now." "And him?" "Gone too. The moment the network died, his connection was severed. He's probably already moving to a new location." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. In trying to expose the Falcon unit's legacy, Jackson had instead ensured its continued secrecy. The classified documents he had tried to upload were now trapped in a system that would take hours to restore, giving the military time to scrub anything sensitive before the network came back online. "There's something else," Mara said, pulling up a small handheld device that had remained connected to the base's backup power. "During the final moments before shutdown, I managed to trace his signal to its source. Not just the general area, the exact location." The screen showed a detailed map with a pulsing red dot. "Abandoned electronics warehouse, Building 47 in the industrial district. He's using a mobile command center, probably military surplus." Reed studied the display. "We could send a team." "No." Mara's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. "This is my responsibility. I created this situation 12 years ago when I made the choice to save him. I need to finish it." "You're not going alone. The task 39.1.t lantext 12, chunk 12-16. From 39.1 "I'm not going at all." Mara's smile was sad but resolute. "Jackson isn't a terrorist, Colonel. He's a broken man who's been carrying a burden he was never meant to bear. Sending soldiers after him will only confirm everything he believes about how the military treats its own." Lieutenant Cho, who had been quietly working at a backup terminal, suddenly looked up. "The system is starting to come back online. Basic functions first, but the core network should be restored within the hour." "Faster than expected," Reed observed. "I built redundancies into the original architecture," Mara explained. "The Falcon unit needed systems that could recover quickly from catastrophic failure. It's one of the features that made our operations possible." As if summoned by their conversation, the main display flickered back to life. Instead of the usual status readouts, however, it showed a single message in stark white text against a black background. "I'm sorry, Mara, for everything. The ghost you saved is finally going to rest. J." The message remained for exactly 30 seconds before fading away. "He's gone," Mara said quietly. "Really gone this time." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know Jackson. He never could live with failure, and from his perspective, this was the ultimate failure. He spent years planning this moment, and I stopped him with a single keystroke." Reed was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "What happens now?" "Now we rebuild. The system will be stronger than before, more secure, and the Falcon unit remains where it belongs, in the shadows, protecting people who will never know we existed. And you? Mara gathered her notebook and the small device she had used to trace Jackson's signal. I go back to being a contractor. Invisible, unremarkable, forgotten. The hell you do? Reed's voice carried the authority of command. What happened here today? You saved this entire facility. $60 million in equipment. Not to mention the lives that could have been lost if those drones had crashed during testing. I was just cleaning up my own mess. You were taking responsibility for something that wasn't entirely your fault. Reed stood, his bearing formal. I'm recommending you for immediate reinstatement. Full rank, full benefits, full recognition. Your task 39-1, quant txt tome 13, chunk 13-16. From 39-1 onxtm? No. Mara's response was immediate and firm. I came here to stop a mistake, not to reclaim a name. The person I was in the Falcon unit, she died in Al-Kamar. I'm someone different now. Lieutenant Cho, who had been listening in fascination, finally spoke up. But you could have everything back. Your military career, your reputation, your place in history. The only history that matters is the one that keeps people safe, Mara replied. Names and files don't save lives. Actions do. She walked toward the door, then paused. Besides, there's something to be said for being invisible. It means you can go places and do things that people with names and ranks can't. As she left the facility, the sun was setting over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Behind her, the base hummed with renewed activity as systems came back online and operations resumed their normal rhythm. But for Mara Ellison, the real work was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Mara sat in the same communications center where this story had begun, her fingers dancing across a keyboard with the same quiet precision that had first caught Colonel Reed's attention. But something had changed in the atmosphere around her. The technicians who worked nearby no longer saw her as just another contractor. They saw her as someone who had earned her place through actions rather than credentials. Ms. E, could you take a look at this? Staff Sergeant Martinez approached her workstation, holding a tablet displaying a network anomaly. It was a simple problem, the kind that would have taken the regular IT staff hours to resolve. Mara glanced at the screen and immediately identified the issue. Routing loop in Sector 7. Reset the primary gateway and flush the cache. That's it? That's it. Martinez shook his head in amazement. You make it look so easy. Everything's easy when you understand the language it speaks, Mara replied, returning to her own work. The truth was, she had refused every offer of reinstatement that Colonel Reed had presented. No medals, no ceremonies, no corrections to her service record. The woman who had once been a ghost in the machine had chosen to remain exactly that, present but unacknowledged, effective but invisible. Your task 39-1 txt 14, chunk 14-16. From 39-1 txt. She visited Fort Banner every Wednesday now, always arriving without fanfare and leaving the same way. Her contractor badge still read consultant, but everyone knew she was something more. The young officers called her Ms. E, and some of them had taken to offering small salutes when they thought no one was looking. You know, Lieutenant Cho said, settling into the chair beside her, I've been thinking about what you said, about being invisible. Oh? I used to think recognition was everything. Getting promoted, having my name on reports, being noticed by the brass. Cho's voice carried a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. But watching you work, seeing how much you accomplish without needing credit, it's changed my perspective. Mara smiled. Recognition is nice, but it's not the point. The point is the work itself, the people you protect, the problems you solve, the quiet victories that no one will ever hear about. Is that why you turned down the reinstatement? Partly, but mostly because the name I keep is the only part of myself I still control. They can erase me from records, deny my existence, pretend I never served, but they can't take away what I choose to do with my life. As if drawn by their conversation, Second Lieutenant Emily Ray approached their workstation. At 24, she was everything Mara had been at that age. Eager, idealistic, convinced that she could change the world through sheer force of will. "Ms. Ellison," she said, her voice carrying the careful respect of someone addressing a legend. "I was wondering if I could ask you something." "Of course." "How do I become someone like you? Someone who can make a real difference?" Mara studied the young woman's face, seeing echoes of her own younger self in those earnest eyes. "The first lesson is the hardest one to learn." "What's that?" "Learn when not to be remembered." Emily frowned. "I don't understand." In a world obsessed with recognition, the strongest protectors are often the ones who vanish from records, but stay in memory. They're the ones who do the work because it needs to be done, not because they'll get credit for it. But how do you know if you're making a difference if no one acknowledges it? Task 39-1 XT 15 Chunk 15-16. From 39-1 text. Mara gestured toward the bustling communications center around them. "Look around. See those technicians working without fear that their systems will be compromised? Those pilots who trust their equipment to bring them home safely? Those officers who sleep soundly knowing their base is secure?" Emily nodded. "That's how you know. Not through medals or ceremonies or names in files. Through the quiet confidence of people who trust that someone is watching over them, even if they don't know who." Later that evening, as Mara prepared to leave the base, she found Colonel Reed waiting by the main checkpoint. In his hands was a small bronze plaque, its surface polished to a mirror shine. "I know you won't accept official recognition," he said, "but I wanted you to see this before it goes up." Mara read the inscription. "Protected not by rank, but by resolve, for the one who returned without orders." "It's going on the wall behind the checkpoint booth," Reed explained. "No name, no details, just a reminder that some people serve without needing applause." "Thank you," Mara said quietly. "But you know I know you can't accept it officially. But I also know that every young officer who passes through here will see it and wonder. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will choose to serve the same way you do." As Mara walked toward the parking lot, she felt a presence beside her. Lieutenant Cho had caught up, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Cho said, "about learning when not to be remembered. I think I'm starting to understand." "It's not about being invisible," Mara replied. "It's about being present in ways that matter. It's about choosing impact over recognition, substance over ceremony." "And you're okay with that? Never getting credit for what you do?" Mara paused beside her car, looking back at the base where lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in those buildings, people were working, learning, growing, protected by systems she had built and maintained without fanfare. "I get something better than credit," she said finally. "I get purpose. I get the knowledge that my work matters, that lives are safer because of choices I made. That's worth more than any medal." As she drove away from Fort Banner, Mara's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for showing me there's another way. ER." She smiled, knowing that somewhere, a young officer was beginning to understand that the most important battles are often fought by people whose names will never appear in history books. In a world obsessed with recognition, Sometimes the strongest protectors are the ones who vanish from records but stay in memory. They're the ones who serve without applause, who protect without praise, who choose to be remembered not for their names but for their actions. Be like Mara. Protect anyway. If you know someone who serves without applause, a teacher who stays late to help struggling students, a nurse who holds a patient's hand in the dark, a maintenance worker who keeps the lights on while others sleep, take a moment to say thank you. Not because they need recognition, but because they deserve to know their work matters. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply acknowledge that someone made a difference, even if the world will never know their name.